right now. All right, confetti. We got the confetti for you, Dan.
I actually like the new league year more than I like New Year's. So
that makes sense for you.
We
love ball
like
here. Okay, we're going to get into all of this, but we do have some breaking news. One of the best available free agents on the board, Adam Schefter, Kyler Murray. What do we know about him right now?
Well, moments ago, Laura, the Arizona Cardinals released Kyler Murray officially. With Murray now free, the Minnesota Vikings are considered the overwhelming favorite to sign him. One source said it would be a big upset if Kyler Murray did not wind up with the Minnesota Vikings. Now that he's free, he's able to do that deal. We'll see how it works out, but look, it's tracking like that, and he's not the only quarterback to just be released. Kyler Murray was, or Kirk Cousins was as well. Another quarterback on the move here. The Falcons have moved on from Kirk Cousins. He becomes a free agent now, and we'll see how that one works out moving forward. But Kyler Murray released, Kirk Cousins released. Two quarterbacks hit the market. Kyler looks like he could be ticketed for Minnesota. We'll see what Cousins does. He's not in as much of a rush, but those are the two particular situations as we know them.
All right, Adam, as the news continues to fly around, we'll keep you here. You're here with us for the hour. We got Dan with us. We got Mina Kimes as well. And Mina, as you hear this news about Kyler Murray, it's what we expected. We're still, of course, expecting that he's tracking toward Minnesota. But what are your thoughts on Kyler?
Well, let's start here. Kyler Murray is a dramatic improvement over what we watched in Minnesota last season. I think the perception around him is that he's very streaky and that maybe he's fallen off from the highs earlier in his career. But look at this. These are Kyler's numbers, his statistical rankings 2024 through 2025. So these are the last 20 or so starts that he's played. He has been an above average quarterback in success rate, EPA per dropback, QBR. And then on the right, you have what Minnesota got from the quarterback position last season. And so my point here is we talk a lot about Kyler's upside and his talent, and there's been times in his career when he's looked like an MVP candidate. But I would argue folks are underestimating the floor he gives you as a quarterback in terms of playing on time and, just his ability to play efficient football. Now, Dan and I have talked about this. This is not an easy and obvious scheme fit with Kevin O'Connell. But to me, the opportunity here to upgrade is not just a challenge, but an opportunity for O'Connell in addition to Murray. Can you evolve your offense to suit the quarterback coming in? That's something I'd like to see because I do think he has a set of tools, and Dan, you can speak to this, that O'Connell can build around.
Yeah, so I think he's going to be in Minnesota. I think he's going to be their starting quarterback. And I would tell you, so when Drew Petzing, who's the play caller from Arizona, who's now the offensive coordinator in Detroit, but when he got to Arizona in 2023, one of the things that changed in really drastic way in comparison to Cliff Kingsbury, who was initially there, was much more under center and much more play action. So if you look at Minnesota and like Sam Darnold and how great Sam Darnold was there, it was because he was phenomenal operating the play action pass game. Kyler actually was really good early on in 2023, and I would tell you the early part of 2024 in the play-action game. Me and I talked about it a ton, like, finally, he's in an offense that really he's thriving in from a pass game perspective. If Kyler can get settled into that, he's probably a more talented playmaker than Sam Darnold was, certainly than Kirk Cousins and J.J. McCarthy were, and so can he do that consistently? Like, that's the question mark that I have. Can he get into that play-action rhythm consistently in Minnesota, if that's the place?
Dan, something that's unique about Kyler is for a quarterback of his size, he will throw over the middle of the field. Totally. Often when we see with quarterbacks who are under 6 foot tall, they have trouble seeing the middle of the field. But, of course, that'll be assisted by the fact if they roll him out more often, that allows him, to see things quite more clearly. And you saw that, again, you made a great point there. Early in Arizona, he has that ability. We know that's what O'Connell wants to do. The middle of the field is such an important part of the Vikings offense. And I would say what differentiates him from J.J. McCarthy is he's able to throw those balls and layer them with touch. That is so important in this offense. Now, the QB designed run element, these are the things I think you want to see O'Connell build around that he has not really done so. I guess Josh Dobbs is the example you would go to. But Kyler is a different skill set in that regard. I'm very interested in watching it because I do think there's a real opportunity here for this Vikings offense to take a different step or to move in a different direction from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and the one thing I do think that would be probably the I guess sticking point would be it's an offense that just wants you to allow the play caller to star. I'll design the plays. I'll get the guys open. You make the throw. And that's why Sam was so great there. Kyler's a playmaker. And so walking that fine line of being the playmaker when needed rather than wanting to, I think will probably be where the biggest growth will have to come from for this, if it's Minnesota, to work the best.
To the points that you guys are making, Kyler Murray, top 10 in completions inside the numbers over his career.
Yeah.
I'm not sure people realize just how good he is at some of these things. And we'll keep an eye on whether or not he does end up in Minnesota. Now, when the clock struck 4 Eastern just a few minutes ago, all the deals that we've been talking about since Monday can officially be signed. It's a good reminder that getting pen to paper on these contracts feels more and more important than ever this year after what happened last night and just the unfolding of the Max Crosby deal falling apart. As we bring Adam back in here, Adam, the Max Crosby trade deal in Baltimore was agreed to, but it was not finalized. Why did it end up ultimately falling apart?
Well, the move that was more surprising than the trade itself was the fact that the Baltimore Ravens decided not to pass him on the physical. And Max Crosby and his wife arrived in Baltimore. He went through a physical on Tuesday. The plan was to have a celebratory day, a dinner out that night. It never materialized. Doctors looked at his knee and had concerns. There were physicals done, MRIs done, and ultimately the Baltimore Ravens had the information and decided that they could not move forward with a deal that would give the Raiders 2 first-round draft picks. Now, Max Crosby's knee surgeon, Dr. Neil Elitrosh, pointed out that Max Crosby is exactly where he is supposed to be at this point in time from a significant knee injury that involved damage to the meniscus, bone, and cartilage. They still believe he'll be ready for opening day 2026, but it's going to take some time to get there first. Not a simple process. So in the interim, now Crosby reverts back to the Raiders. He was in their building today. They are taking calls from teams, but again, they wouldn't move him unless they got the asking price that they were seeking, which last time was at least 2 first-round draft picks. Whether there's a team out there willing to compensate them to that high a level, whether they're willing to budge off those demands, those requests, we'll see how this evolves. But for the time being, Max Crosby is once again a Las Vegas Raider.
Yeah, just a wild situation, right? There's no other way to look at this.
And
although
as for
you
Trey
can...
Hendrickson.
Oh, go ahead, Adam. Tell us more.
No, I don't know whether you would team me up or I was supposed to just take myself there.
Keep
My apologies,
going. No,
Laura.
Adam,
Essentially,
go.
Trey Hendrickson, once the Max Crosby deal didn't get done, basically the Baltimore Ravens reached agreement with Trey Hendrickson on a 4-year, $112 million deal that could be worth up to $120 million. It's a situation where Trey Hendrickson had been talking to the Ravens, he'd been talking to the Commanders, he'd been talking to the Eagles, he'd been talking to the Buccaneers. There were a lot of options, a lot of things that came available here in the last 48 hours or so. Tough decision, but he was looking for stability. And now he stays in the AFC North, where he will go up against his former team and his former quarterback, Joe Burrow, twice a year. The Ravens still have more moves to make, but they landed a big chess piece today in the form of Trey Hendrickson.
Excellent work, Adam. By the way, reminder to people, Adam's been breaking all this news. It's been a wild time for all of us as fans. I can't even imagine what Adam's been trying to manage on that end. Mina, I want to point this out before we talk through the Baltimore side of all this. I've spent some time talking today to Stefania Bell, our medical expert here at ESPN. She's pointed out that all these teams can conduct their own physicals, right? These players come to them. They get imaging done by those teams. It's up to the teams about their comfort level on these players. Take that for what you will with how you want to parse through this, but any issue on how Baltimore handled all of this?
I think it's really hard to know. There's so many unknowns here. It is not outside the realm of possibility that the Ravens looked at a player who's pushing 29, who's played more defensive snaps than any defensive lineman in football over the last 6 years, and saw something that concerned them. It's also not outside the realm of possibility that they got cold feet because they gave up so much to get him. To me, this is something where over time we'll probably find out what happened through Max Crosby and his play. If he returns and he looks great, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to look at the Ravens with a little bit of a side eye. But if he does struggle, if it takes him a while to get back to health, if he's not the same moving forward, I think we'll look back at this decision and say, yeah, the Ravens were right. So I guess to answer your question, to go back to it, for me, it's still kind of an incomplete. I think there's a lot left to be determined.
Yeah, it looks weird. It looks odd. There's a lot of question marks attached to it. That doesn't mean it was malicious in intent. That doesn't mean it lacks integrity. They were allowed to make the decision because of the time frame and how the NFL operates, the legal tampering period, and just recently when the new league year starts. They're in the right, I guess, legal process of going about having the opportunity to change their minds. I feel for Max because now there's a giant cloud and question mark of what's his future going to look like. I also just fall under the belief that this is an amazing opportunity for other organizations that might believe.
You said the Eagles earlier?
Yeah, Philadelphia, Washington, the Bears, the Rams, the Bills, that just, I continue to hear this statement. They weren't comfortable with the knee given what the compensation was going to be. So if the compensation changes, does that make other teams more comfortable with the knee and the long-term prognosis health-wise of that knee?
Yeah, Mina, when you think of some of those teams that Dan laid out there, anybody sound attractive to you as maybe getting, I don't want to call it a bargain for Max Crosby, but based on what it was before, it'll seem like a bargain.
Yeah, I think it's going to be diminished value, not just because of, the potential of an injury or their own valuation, but because there are fewer bidders now than there would have been at the beginning of free agency, most likely. Dan mentioned some of the teams that I'd be intrigued by. I'll throw out another one, New England. They're picking 31st in the draft, of course, in the first round, but they still have a ton of cap space and I think a pretty significant need in terms of an edge rusher. So, that's a team that's been linked as maybe a potential trade target for A.J. Brown. We'll see if that has any legs. But if not, I would be very comfortable, if I'm New England, using that 31st overall pick to go after Max Crosby.
Yeah, MK, I think we were talking about it. It comes down to, if you're the Raiders and you're just 24 hours removed from the emotion of it, where do you stand on what are you willing to accept? Or do you want to play the long game and think that his value is going to get back to where it was? Or it's going to increase? Do you want to wait closer to the draft? Are you willing to try to hold on and have him play for the Raiders this year? But then there's also that opposite risk of what happens if, the value takes a drastic decrease. And I think if you're the Raiders, you just have to be having those intense conversations. If I were them, I'm trying to take the best I can right now and understanding it's not going to be the best. And I think, or what it was. And I think if you're other teams, like, hey, what are we willing to maybe be a little bit more aggressive on, knowing that we're going to get a player that if we are right, gosh, we're going to get an absolute steal here.
Yeah, and a very motivated steal, right? Because you bet Max Crosby wants to come back and prove that the Ravens screwed up here. The funny thing about the Raiders is, although their leverage has decreased somewhat because it's like later 2 days into free agency, but you understand, right? They still maintain, I think, a decent amount of leverage because they have so much damn money. This is not a team that desperately needs to move off of Max Crosby, even though they made a ton of signings in free agency. They had a ton of money. With Crosby back on the books, they still have cap space, not just this year, but next year as well, over